Commander Vexlin squinted against the harsh glare of the twin suns as they slunk toward the horizon, casting long shadows over doing their best impression of a seizure skyward. She rubbed her temples, hoping to massage away the creeping suspicion that she and her ragtag group of humans had been dealt a cosmic-level prank. I swear to the non-existent gods, if one more of those squawking feather dusters flies into the sun, I'm gonna lose it, she muttered, eyeing the massive, glowing orb nailed in the sky. It was about as authentic as her grandmother's teeth. Jax, lounging nearby with an air of someone who'd given up caring several existential crises ago, let out a dry laugh. Yeah, well, at least they tried to give us a sky. Beats staring at a metal ceiling, right? Does it though? Tala shot back. I'd almost prefer the honesty of a good, old-fashioned iron box. This, she waved a hand at the landscape, this is just insulting. The moon, or whatever the hell they were supposed to believe it was, had all the charm of a cheap sci-fi set. Trees too green, rocks too round, and a river that babbled unnervingly like it was being fed lines by an alien director. Maybe they think we're too stupid to notice, mused Grieve, the group's resident tinkerer and pessimist. He was sprawled in the grass, poking at it like it might bite. Or maybe they just don't care. After all, who needs authenticity when you've got spectacle? Spectacle my ass, Tala grumbled. I'm half expecting a laugh track to kick in next. A shadow fell across them, blocking the artificial sunlight. It was Lyra, their self-appointed guardian of optimism. She was practically vibrating with suppressed energy, like a puppy who'd just discovered fetch. Hey guys, maybe it's not so bad. I mean, look at this place. It's like a vacation, right? Jax snorted. Sure, if your idea of a vacation is being kidnapped and tossed into a cosmic ant farm. Oh, come on, Lyra persisted. It's not all doom and gloom. Maybe they're studying us, learning our habits. Like a nature documentary, but with more existential dread. As long as they don't start narrating, Tala replied. I'd prefer not to hear what Sir Squishy Tentacle thinks about my mating habits. They all laughed, a dry, brittle sound that echoed off the fake cliffs. It was this kind of gallows humor that kept them sane. That, and the occasional desperate hope that they weren't completely doomed. So what's the plan, fearless leader? Jax asked, tilting his head to look at Tala, his face a mask of practiced nonchalance. You gonna lead us in a daring escape, or are we just gonna keep roasting marshmallows over our own delusions? Tala sighed, her fingers drumming against her leg as she considered their options, what few there were. We need more information. If we're gonna break out of this zoo, we need to know what we're up against. Easier said than done, Grieve said, flicking a stray blade of synthetic grass. They've thought of everything, cameras, drones, those freaky animal hybrids. Yeah, well, everyone screws up eventually, Tala said with a shrug. Even omnipotent space bastards. The group settled into a momentary silence, each lost in thoughts of their own. It was the kind of heavy, palpable quiet that suggested 1,000 unspoken fears. Then a sudden screech split the air and they all jumped. Lyra clutched her chest dramatically. What the hell was that? Not a clue, Tala replied, already on her feet, eyes scanning the faux landscape. But if it's part of the exhibit, it's about to meet an angry customer. They moved as one, a scrappy, determined unit, cobbled together more by necessity than mutual affection. It was amazing how a shared enemy could unite even the most disparate souls. This way, Jax called, motioning toward a cluster of trees that looked suspiciously identical. As they crept forward, Tala couldn't help but think of how absurdly mundane it all looked, like a theme park ride version of the great outdoors. The screeching continued, a high-pitched wail that seemed to pierce the very fabric of their nerves. It was like nails on a cosmic chalkboard. Grieve, ever the pessimist, muttered, "We're gonna get eaten by whatever the hell that is. I can feel it in my bones." "Then I hope it chokes," Tala shot back, trying to keep her voice light. "I hear humans a tough meat to swallow." As they approached the source of the noise, the scenery shifted from comically pristine to unsettlingly chaotic. Trees were toppled, the ground scorched in patches, and there was an acrid, burnt smell hanging in the air. "Looks like something had a tantrum," Lyra observed, kicking at a piece of charred debris. "Or maybe something escaped," Jack suggested, his eyes narrowing as he surveyed the scene. "And if it did, maybe we can too." The thought was as tempting as it was terrifying. Tala nodded slowly. "It's worth a shot. We need to know more about this place, and if that means poking the bear, or whatever unholy monstrosity they're keeping here, then so be it." "Great," Grieve sighed, resigned. "Just when I thought today couldn't get any worse." "Oh, it can always get worse," Tala replied, grimly amused. "But maybe, just maybe, we'll get lucky for once." With that, they steeled themselves and plunged into the unknown, driven by equal parts desperation and defiance. They were humans, after all, foolhardy, stubborn, and always ready to bite the hand that feeds if it dared to cage them. As they moved deeper into the simulated wilderness, the sense of being watched intensified. It was a prickling, annoying sensation, like an itch you couldn't quite reach. "I swear if these aliens are watching, I hope they're enjoying the show," Jack said with a wry grin. "Oh, they're watching," Tala replied, scanning the trees for any sign of surveillance. "But let's give him something to really talk about." They rounded a bend in the path, and what they saw stopped them cold. A massive, shimmering barrier loomed before them, stretching high into the artificial sky. It hummed with an energy that was both alien and eerily familiar. "Well, that's new," Lyra said, eyes wide. "Looks like the end of the line," Grieve muttered, ever the pessimist. But Tala was already stepping forward, her eyes fixed on the barrier. "Or maybe it's the beginning," she said softly, a dangerous glint in her eyes. "You've got that look again," Jax noted, falling into step beside her. "The we're about to do something incredibly stupid look." Tala grinned, a fierce, reckless grin. "Yeah, well, stupid's gotten us this far. Might as well see how much further it can take us." With nothing to lose and everything to gain, they approached the barrier. Whatever lay beyond it, they were ready to face it together, humans adrift in a cosmic zoo, determined to rewrite the script. As they reached the barrier, it shimmered, a ripple of energy pulsing through the air. And then, with a sound like a sigh, it opened, revealing a path into the unknown. Tala glanced back at her companions, her heart pounding in her chest. "Ready or not," she said, voice steady despite the chaos swirling inside her. And with that, they stepped through, ready to confront whatever strange, new world awaited them beyond. The transition through the barrier felt like walking through a bad hologram. One moment they were in the artificial hellhole, surrounded by fake flora and fauna, and the next, they were blinking under harsh lights in a room that looked suspiciously like a control center. "Well, this is anticlimactic," Jack said, his voice echoing off the sterile walls. "Where's the alien welcome committee with their ceremonial fruit baskets?" "Maybe they're hiding," Lyra suggested, peering around like a tourist who'd wandered into the wrong museum exhibit. "Or just sticking to their observation protocols." Tala didn't respond, too busy taking in the vast array of consoles, each one pulsing with data and dancing holographic displays. It was like stumbling into the brain of a giant, indifferent beast that just happened to be monitoring their every move. "So, what do we have here?" Grieve muttered, his fingers itching to poke at all the blinking lights. "Looks like someone's been busy." "Busy spying on us, you mean?" Tala replied, her eyes narrowing. "I always knew my life was worthy of a reality show, just didn't think it'd be this kind of audience." Jax picked up a small device from a nearby console, turning it over in his hands. It was sleek, with a strange symbol etched into the surface. "Think this is important or just another fancy paperweight?" "Fancy paperweights don't usually come with their own instruction manual," Grieve said, pointing at the display as icons shifted and rearranged themselves into a comprehensible language. "Quick's control interface activated," it declared in a voice that was both mechanical and annoyingly chipper. "Awaiting command input." Lyra nudged Jax. "See. Even their tech sounds smug." Tala stepped forward, her curiosity outweighing her caution. "Let's see what these quicks think they're doing, shall we?" With a few taps, she pulled up a log of recent activity. It read like a diary, only without the teenage angst. Just cold, clinical observations about human behavior, peppered with notes about their reactions to various stimuli. Subject Tala exhibits heightened aggression in response to environmental manipulation, she read aloud, rolling her eyes. Well, color me surprised, Jax chuckled. They think we're all rabid monkeys in a cage, don't they? Seems more like they're trying to figure out why we haven't started flinging poo yet, Grieve added dryly. Lyra, who had been scrolling through another screen, suddenly gasped. Guys, you need to see this. She expanded a document and they gathered around, eyes widening as they read. The Quicks feared humans, not because of their military strength, intelligence, or any other typical reason you'd expect a superior alien race to quake in their metaphorical boots. No, it was their emotions that scared them. Their ability to feel deeply, to rage and love with equal intensity. Well, that's a twist, Jack said, scratching his head. We're not the primitive savages they thought we'd be. More like emotional landmines, Tala corrected. They can't predict us and that scares the hell out of them, Grieve snorted. Good to know our mood swings are our best defense. Take that, cosmic overlords. So, what's the plan? Lyra asked, eyes shining with a mix of excitement and dread. We use our incredible human emotions to stage a coup, Tala crossed her arms, considering. We use this fear against them. If they're terrified of us going off script, we give them the full Broadway show. Great, more drama, Jax said with a sigh. Can't you just feel the Emmy buzz? They huddled together, plotting their next move. It wasn't much of a plan, more of a reckless stab in the dark, but it was something. And in their situation, something was better than nothing. They'd been handed a weapon they never expected to have, an existential bomb primed to explode with tears and laughter, rage and compassion. The kind of weapon that could fracture the polished veneer of any superior race's ego. Let's make them regret ever tuning into the human channel, Tala declared, her voice a dangerous mix of determination and glee. Jax took another look around the Quicks control room. You think they'll be watching when we blow up their ratings? Count on it, Grieve replied, already fiddling with a control panel trying to override the system. And if not, we'll make sure to send them a highlight reel. Lyra grinned. Finally, something we're good at, being emotionally unstable. More screens flickered to life, each displaying a different segment of the compound. It was sprawling, a veritable labyrinth of labs, observation decks, and living quarters. More than enough space for the Quicks to indulge their voyeuristic tendencies. Jax pointed to a section labeled Subject Stimulation Center. Think that's where they keep the cattle prods. Or maybe it's just a really fancy spa, Lyra quipped, the tension in her voice undercut by humor. Tala nodded toward the far corner. That's our way out. If we can disable those barriers, we might just have a shot at making it to wherever the hell out is. Assuming we don't get vaporized first, Grieve added helpfully. They worked quickly, fingers flying over controls, trying to decipher the Quicks' language of symbols and sounds. It was like playing an incredibly high-stakes game of charades. As they toiled, Tala reflected on the absurdity of it all. There they were, a ragtag bunch of emotionally volatile monkeys, trying to outsmart a race of technologically superior aliens. And somehow, against all odds, it felt like they might actually have a chance. Hey, I think I got it, Grieve announced after what felt like an eternity. Good, Tala replied, a fierce grin spreading across her face. Let's show these aliens just how unpredictable we can be. With a final keystroke, the room shuddered and the barrier shimmered, no longer the impenetrable wall it once was. It was time to put on a show. Jax gave Tala a mock salute. Lead the way, fearless leader. She took a deep breath, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and anticipation. Let's go give these Quicks something to really worry about. They moved quickly, each step echoing through the corridors as they sought out their alien captors, ready to confront them with the full force of humanity's chaotic heart. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with their first Quicks. It was taller than they'd expected, all glistening tentacles and smooth, featureless skin that seemed to shift color with its mood. Right now it was a rather unflattering shade of panic. "Well, aren't you a sight for sore eyes?" Jack said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. The quicks fluttered, a strange warble escaping from where its mouth should have been. It looked from one human to the next, clearly at a loss for how to handle this sudden turn of events. "What's the matter?" Lyra taunted. "Never seen a human before. Or just scared of catching feels?" Tala stepped forward, meeting the alien's gaze, or at least where she assumed its gaze would be. "We know you're afraid of us, afraid of what we can do, and you should be." The quicks twitched, its colors cycling rapidly through a spectrum of emotions that would put a mood ring to shame. "See, we might be unpredictable, but that just makes us dangerous," Tala continued, her voice calm and steady. "And right now, that unpredictability is gonna be your worst nightmare." The alien recoiled, tentacles flailing in what could only be described as an interstellar hissy fit. "And scene," Greaves said, clapping his hands together. "Give us a call if you need an encore." They left the quicks quivering in their wake, adrenaline driving them forward as they made their way through the maze of corridors and control rooms. Each encounter with the aliens played out the same: astonishment, fear, and a hurried retreat. The humans were like a force of nature, a hurricane of raw, unchecked emotion sweeping through the sterile halls of their captors. For the first time in what felt like forever, they had the upper hand. It was exhilarating, terrifying, and oddly satisfying all at once. As they approached what they hoped was the final barrier, a section labeled Quick Central Command, they paused, gathering their courage for the final act. "Ready to bring down the house?" Tala asked, glancing at her companions. Jack smirked, his eyes alight with mischief. "Let's give them a finale they won't forget." With a collective breath, they stormed the command center, ready to face whatever lay beyond and determined to make their captors finally understand the true power of humanity. "Surprise!" Tala announced as they burst into the room, arms wide as if presenting a prize on a game show. Except this wasn't a game, and the only prize was their freedom. The quicks within looked different, an air of authority about them as they faced the humans' unexpected rebellion. But there was no denying the flicker of fear that rippled through their ranks. "We're done playing by your rules," Tala declared, her voice ringing with conviction. "You wanted to understand us. Well, here we are. All our glorious inconsistency, all our emotions you can't predict." One of the quicks stepped forward, its form quivering like jelly on a fault line. It spoke, the translation coming through a nearby console. "Why do you resist? We mean you no harm." "Really? You mean us no harm?" Jax laughed, the sound harsh and incredulous. "That why you've been watching us like lab rats?" "Because we're such fascinating dinner guests." Lyra rolled her eyes. "Please, your little science project here is about as harmless as sticking your head in a lion's mouth." Tala took a step forward, eyes locked on the lead quicks. "You may have built this artificial world, this cage to study us, but you forgot one thing. You can't cage what you don't understand." The quicks consulted among themselves, the room filled with the soft hum of their alien communication. It was clear they were at a loss, faced with a threat they couldn't quantify or control. Finally, the lead quick spoke again, the translation weary, almost resigned. "What do you propose?" Tala exchanged a look with her companions, the unspoken understanding among them as strong as steel. "Let us go. Release us and we'll leave in peace. We'll even send a postcard," Jax added with a grin. "Wish you were here and all that." There was a tense pause, the room filled with the anticipation of a million possibilities. And then slowly the quicks nodded, their colors shifting to a muted, resigned hue. "Very well," the lead quick said. "You will be released." Tala nodded, relief flooding her veins like a cool breeze on a sweltering day. "Good choice. For both our sakes." As the barriers fell and the path to freedom opened before them, the humans turned their backs on the quicks, ready to leave behind the artificial hellhole and reclaim their place in the universe. "Guess we weren't such a great reality show after all," Jax mused as they made their way toward the exit. Or maybe we were too real, Lyra replied, her voice tinged with a mix of triumph and sadness. Grieve chuckled, shaking his head. Either way, I'd say we won. Tala led the way, her heart lighter than it had been in a long time. They were battered, bruised, and forever changed, but they were still standing, still human. And in the end, that was their greatest strength. As they made their way through the newly opened path, the illusion of victory shimmered only briefly before being ripped apart like a cheap curtain. They hadn't gone more than a dozen steps when the walls shifted, and the floor beneath them felt like it was about to up and walk away. "Oh great," Jax muttered, glancing around as the corridor morphed into an entirely new configuration. The Quicks decided to play interior decorator again. "Nice of them to keep things fresh," Lyra added, her sarcasm as sharp as a thruster blade. "Wouldn't want to get too comfortable, right?" Tala scowled at the shifting architecture. "It's like being trapped inside a kaleidoscope from hell. At least it's not a reality TV show anymore," Grieve noted, his fingers twitching like they desperately wanted to dismantle something. "Now it's an obstacle course. Great improvement," Jack snorted. "I'll take my chances with alien real estate over alien producers any day. Less chance of spontaneous musical numbers." They pushed forward, sticking close together as the corridor led them on a dizzying journey through the bowels of the compound. The walls were an unsettling blur of colors and lights, the kind of ambience that would have made a lesser human puke their guts out after 5 minutes. But these weren't lesser humans. This ragtag bunch had seen things that would make most people wish for a merciful end. So they trudged on, eyes peeled for the next inevitable snag in their escape plan. "Who knew the Quicks were so fond of labyrinths?" Grieve said, his voice tinged with an engineer's curiosity rather than fear. "Wonder if they have a minotaur lurking somewhere around here." "Hope not," Lyra replied dryly. "I left my ball of string back home." After what felt like an eternity of wrong turns and dead ends, they stumbled into a room they'd never seen before. The walls were lined with glowing panels and floating holograms, each displaying streams of data in the Quicks' indecipherable language. "Looks like we found the nerve center," Tala said, her eyes scanning the room for anything useful. "This might be our chance to get the upper hand again." Jax rolled his eyes. "Because that worked out so well last time." "Hey, third time's the charm, right?" Grieve replied, already making a beeline for the nearest console. "Not if those walls keep moving like they are auditioning for Cirque du Soleil," Lyra said, keeping one eye on the entrance, just in case the Quicks decided to drop by for a surprise visit. Grieve quickly got to work, his hands dancing over the controls with the kind of dexterity that suggested he spent far too much time in front of a keyboard. The rest of them waited, the tension in the air thick enough to cut with a plasma blade. "Okay, so here's the deal," Grieve said after a few minutes of intense concentration. "This place is basically one big puzzle box and the Quicks have all the cheat codes." "Which means?" Tala prompted, her patience stretching thin. "Which means they've got the walls, floors, and probably the air ducts set to change configuration whenever they want," Grieve explained. "But the good news is, I think I can lock down the current setup for a while. Give us a chance to plan our next move without the whole place turning into a disco rave." "Just what I always wanted," Jax muttered. "A chance to plan my own demise in peace." Grieve's fingers flew over the controls, inputting commands with the kind of speed that spoke more to desperation than confidence. A few tense moments later, the room gave a slight shudder, and the walls stopped their unsettling dance. "There," Grieve said, a note of triumph in his voice. "That should keep the place stable for a bit. Now we just have to figure out our next move before the Quicks notice," Tala said, her mind already racing with possibilities. "Maybe we can find a way to exploit their vulnerabilities," Lyra suggested, her sharp eyes scanning the room for anything that might give them an edge. "Some kind of system flaw they haven't accounted for. Or we could just bribe them with reality TV contracts," Jax offered. "Bet they don't have enough drama in their lives." "Yeah, because we really want to give them more reasons to keep us around," Tala replied, rolling her eyes. As they brainstormed, Grieve continued to poke around the system, looking for any weaknesses or hidden exploits that might tip the balance in their favor. Meanwhile, Tala paced the room, her mind a whirlwind of ideas and half-formed plans. The problem with the Quicks, she mused, was that they were so damn efficient. Every system, every protocol, every single thing about this place was optimized beyond belief. And while that made them formidable foes, it also made them predictable. One thing humans excelled at was finding the chinks in the armor of the overconfident. "Okay, so hear me out," Tala said, stopping in her tracks as an idea crystallized in her mind. "What if we give them a problem they can't solve? Something no amount of technology or logic can fix. And how exactly do we pull that off?" Jax asked, eyebrow raised in skepticism. "By throwing a wrench in their perfection," Tala replied, her eyes glinting with a spark of mischief. "We've got chaos on our side, let's use it." Grieve looked intrigued. "You mean like a virus, something to mess with their systems?" "Exactly," Tala said, her excitement building. "But not just any virus. We need something unpredictable, something that exploits their obsession with order and perfection." Lyra grinned. "Sounds like a plan, but where do we get something like that?" "Leave that to me," Grieve said, a wicked smile spreading across his face. "I'll cook up something special." As Grieve got to work, Tala, Jax, and Lyra kept watch, their nerves on edge as they waited for the inevitable backlash. The Quicks may have been caught off guard once, but they wouldn't fall for the same trick twice. They needed to be ready for whatever came next. It wasn't long before Grieve's concoction was ready, a digital cocktail designed to sow chaos in the Quicks' pristine systems. If it worked, it would be the equivalent of letting loose a horde of toddlers in a porcelain shop. "Here goes nothing," Grieve said, uploading the virus with a flourish. "Let's see how they like a taste of human ingenuity." The effect was almost immediate. Alarms blared, lights flickered, and the once orderly streams of data on the screens descended into a chaotic mess. It was as if the entire system was having a nervous breakdown. "Wow," Jax said, a hint of admiration in his voice. "I think you gave them a stroke." "Good," Tala replied, her lips curving into a satisfied smile. "Now let's get moving before they recover." As they navigated the now chaotic compound, the atmosphere was charged with adrenaline. Every step felt like a victory, every corner turned a testament to their unpredictability. "Think they'll realize what hit them?" Lyra asked, her tone light despite the danger. "I'm betting they'll be too busy putting out fires to worry about us," Grieve replied, his confidence bolstered by their small win. But the Quicks were nothing if not persistent. It didn't take long before they regrouped, their systems stabilizing faster than any of them had anticipated. The humans had bought themselves some time, but not as much as they'd hoped. "Looks like they're catching up," Jax said, glancing at the nearest screen where order was slowly being restored. "Guess they don't stay frazzled for long." "Then we need to move faster," Tala said, determination etched into her features. "We can't let them regain control." The group picked up the pace, navigating the corridors with a newfound urgency. The compound was a maze of possibilities, each turn a potential trap or salvation. But they didn't have the luxury of hesitation, not if they wanted to make it out in one piece. As they pushed forward, it became clear that the Quicks had upped the ante. Security drones zipped through the corridors, their presence a stark reminder of the stakes. The humans had become a thorn in their side, and they clearly intended to pluck it out with extreme prejudice. "Guess they didn't like our little surprise," Lyra noted, ducking behind a bulkhead as a drone zipped by. "How rude," Jax said, his voice dripping with mock indignation. "And here we went through all that trouble to make it just for them." "Focus, people," Tala said, her eyes scanning the corridor for their next move. "We need to stay ahead of them." Easier said than done. The Quicks' technology was impressive, their coordination seamless. For every maneuver the humans made, the alien response was swift and calculated. But the humans had one advantage the Quicks couldn't quantify: desperation. It was desperation that fueled their resolve. their willingness to take risks the Quicks couldn't comprehend, and it was desperation that led them to their next move. "We need to split up," Tala decided, her voice firm. "It's the only way we'll manage to outmaneuver them." Grieve hesitated. "Splitting up means less firepower if we run into trouble, which is exactly why they'll focus on the bigger group," Tala countered. "We can cover more ground if we divide their attention." "She's right," Lyra agreed. "It's risky, but it's our best shot." "Sounds like a plan," Jax said, shrugging. "Or a really bad idea, but what the hell, let's roll those dice." With that, they split into two groups. Tala and Grieve took one path, while Jax and Lyra went another. Each group moved with purpose, knowing that every second counted. Tala and Grieve found themselves weaving through a section of the compound that was even more alien than the rest. Strange machinery whirred and clanked around them, each device a mystery waiting to be solved. "Think we could use any of this stuff?" Grieve wondered aloud, his eyes alight with a tinker's curiosity. "Only if you can figure it out before the Quicks catch up," Tala replied, her focus unwavering. As they moved deeper into the heart of the compound, their path took them through a series of interconnected rooms, each one filled with more of the Quicks' enigmatic technology. It was both fascinating and frustrating, so much potential, and yet so little time to exploit it. Meanwhile, Jax and Lyra found themselves navigating a labyrinth of narrow corridors, their progress slowed by the constant threat of drones and security patrols. "This is starting to feel like one of those cheap horror flicks," Jax grumbled, his eyes scanning for the next obstacle. "Any second now, some monster's gonna jump out and eat us." "Only if we let it," Lyra replied, her voice steady despite the tension. "Remember, we're the scary ones here." Their journey took them to a section of the compound that seemed oddly deserted, the silence broken only by the distant hum of machinery. It was eerie, like the calm before a storm. "Think we've lost them?" Jax asked, his voice a low whisper. "Maybe," Lyra said, her eyes wary. "But let's not get comfortable." Their caution proved wise. As they turned a corner, they came face to face with a trio of Quicks, their presence a stark reminder of the danger they were in. "Well, this is awkward," Jax said, flashing a grin that was more bravado than anything else. The Quicks didn't respond, their intent clear as they moved to block the humans' escape. "Looks like they want to chat," Lyra said, shifting into a ready stance. "I'm not really in the mood for conversation," Jax replied, crouching slightly as he prepared for a fight. The standoff was tense, each side waiting for the other to make a move. But the humans had already made their decision. There was no going back now. With a nod, Jax and Lyra launched themselves at the aliens, their movements a fluid dance of survival. The Quicks were formidable, their coordination a testament to their training. But the humans fought with the kind of grit that couldn't be taught. It was a battle of wills, each side pushing the other to their limits. And yet, despite the odds, the humans held their ground. They were tired, battered, but they refused to give in. Back in the depths of the compound, Tala and Grieve pressed on, their path taking them ever closer to their goal. The Quicks were relentless, their pursuit a constant shadow over their every move. But the humans were determined, their resolve unshaken. As the two groups moved through the labyrinthine corridors, their separate journeys led them inexorably toward a final confrontation. Each step brought them closer to the heart of the Quicks' stronghold, and with it, the promise of freedom. They had come so far, endured so the atmosphere in the compound was tense enough to snap like cheap plastic. Tala squinted at the corridor ahead, her scowl aimed at the shifting walls that seemed to have a mind of their own. "I swear, if these walls decide to play musical chairs one more time, I'm going to lose my mind," she muttered, sidestepping a panel that threatened to swallow her foot. Grieve, tinkering with a device that looked like it was cobbled together from alien cereal boxes, chuckled. "At least you know they'll change the tune." "Keeps things interesting." "Interesting isn't the word I'd use," Tala replied, stepping over a wire that had sprung from the floor. "I prefer unnecessarily complicated." "You say potato, I say let's not get mashed," Grieve retorted, his eyes never leaving the device. "Speaking of which, I've got an idea that just might mess with these Quix's heads." "Can't wait to hear it," Tala said, glancing back to see if Jax and Lyra were keeping up. Meanwhile, Jax was eyeing the ever-shifting corridor with a mixture of amusement and exasperation. "I swear this place has more mood swings than a teenager on a sugar high," he commented, ducking under a low-hanging pipe. "Maybe we should prescribe it something," Lyra quipped, sidestepping a drone that whizzed past with all the urgency of a caffeinated wasp. "You know, something to even out the hormones." Jax grinned, adjusting his grip on his laser pistol. "Or a lobotomy. I hear that's pretty effective." The group regrouped in a small alcove that seemed mercifully stable for the moment. Tala's eyes darted around, searching for the next move. "All right, listen up," she said, drawing everyone's attention. "The Quicks are on high alert, meaning it's time to get creative. We need to exploit something they don't understand. Like our stunning personalities," Lyra suggested, her grin sharp as a blade. "As charming as that sounds," Tala replied dryly, "I was thinking more along the lines of human compassion." Jax raised an eyebrow. "Compassion? You planning to hug them into submission?" "No," Tala said deadpan, "but we can use their fear of it. These guys are terrified of anything they can't quantify. Compassion, unpredictability. It all throws them off balance." "Interesting angle," Grieve mused, a glint in his eye. "So we make them believe we're capable of goodness. That'll really screw with their circuits. And while they're busy trying to figure out if we're a threat or a gift basket," Jax added, "we make our move." "Exactly," Tala confirmed. "Grieve, how's that chaos cocktail of yours holding up?" Grieve grinned like a kid who'd just heard Santa was real. "It's ready for round 2, might even make them a little philosophical." "Great," Tala said, her resolve firm. "Let's give them a lesson in unpredictability." With the plan set, they moved with renewed purpose. Tala led the way, her eyes scanning for opportunities to spread the chaos. Around them, the compound's lighting flickered like a disco ball on its last legs. As they progressed, their path took them into a room filled with glowing panels and floating holograms. The data streams were a garbled mess, still recovering from Grieve's first virus. Tala approached the Quick's control interface, its mechanical voice activating as they drew near. "Awaiting command input," it droned, as welcoming as a tax collector. "Hey, Grieve," Tala called over, "think you can teach this thing some manners?" Grieve cracked his knuckles with a theatrical flourish. "Step aside and watch the magic." As Grieve worked his digital sorcery, Jax kept an eye on the entrance. "You know, I never thought hacking an alien system would look so much like playing an arcade game." "You should see him with a joystick," Lyra added, watching Grieve's fingers dance over the controls. "It's like watching a concert pianist on drugs, or just a regular concert pianist," Jax replied, smirking. "Done," Grieve announced, stepping back from the interface. "Let's see how they handle a little emotional overload." The room's lights dimmed, the holograms swirling into patterns that were bizarrely reminiscent of hearts and smiley faces. It was like a Valentine's Day card sent straight from the Twilight Zone. "Think that'll do the trick?" Lyra asked, her expression a mix of skepticism and admiration. "If nothing else, it'll confuse the hell out of them," Grieve replied, looking satisfied. "Good," Tala said, nodding. "Now we keep moving. Jax, Lyra, you take the left route. Grieve and I will head right." Splitting up again. "Didn't we just cover this part of the horror movie?" Jax asked, feigning exasperation. "Think of it as a sequel," Tala shot back. "Now get moving." As the group split once more, the compound's atmosphere seemed to grow more oppressive, the walls closing in with every step. But the humans pressed on, their determination fueling each stride. Jax and Lyra navigated their way through another labyrinthine section, dodging the increasing number of drones that zipped by like buzzing hornets with a serious vendetta. "Gotta hand it to them," Jax said, ducking under a low beam. "When these guys decide to up their game, they really go all in." "Yeah, well, I'm not a fan of their particular brand of enthusiasm," Lyra replied, shooting a drone with precision that only came from years of practice. Let's just hope Tala's plan throws them for a loop. Hope's one thing, Jax said, but I'm rooting for chaos. Meanwhile, Tala and Grieve found themselves deep in the bowels of the compound, the corridors twisting around them like a giant's intestines. The air was thick with the hum of machinery and the faint scent of ozone. You ever get the feeling we're just rats in a maze? Grieve asked, glancing around at the alien architecture. Yeah, Tala replied, but we're the rats with guns. That counts for something. Their path took them to a control center, a room bathed in harsh light and filled with consoles that blinked with alien symbols. Tala surveyed the room, looking for any opportunity to throw another spanner in the Quix's works. Think we can do anything useful in here? Grieve wondered, already eyeing a console that seemed to be the main hub. If by useful you mean devastating, then yes, Tala replied, gesturing for him to get started. Grieve set to work, his fingers flying over the controls with the kind of confidence that came from knowing you were about to ruin someone's day. Let's see how they like a taste of their own chaos, he muttered, a wicked grin on his face. As the console began to flicker under Grieve's ministrations, Tala kept watch, her mind racing through their next steps. The Quicks were relentless, their pursuit as inevitable as death and taxes, but they had to keep pushing, keep improvising. Any day now, Grieve, Tala prompted, her eyes flicking to the door. Almost there, he replied, his focus unbroken. Just a few more. Before he could finish, the room's alarms blared to life, the sound sharp enough to pierce eardrums. Red lights flashed, bathing the room in an ominous glow. Looks like they found us, Tala said, her voice calm despite the urgency. Time to move. Grieve nodded, stepping back from the console as the data streams descended into chaos once more. Let's hope this buys us some time. They slipped out of the control center, the corridors shifting around them like a disgruntled beast trying to shake off an itch. The compound was more alive than ever, its defenses working overtime to contain the threat. But for all their technology, the Quicks couldn't anticipate the humans' next move. They couldn't fathom the stubbornness that had brought them this far, the grit that drove them forward despite the odds. Jax and Lyra, meanwhile, had found their own way to disrupt the Quicks' operations. They'd stumbled upon a hangar, its vast expanse filled with sleek alien craft just begging to be misused. This looks promising, Jax said, eyeing the ships with an appreciative whistle. Think one of these babies could take us out for a spin? Depends, Lyra replied, her eyes scanning the hangar for any signs of life. You know how to fly one of these things, Jax shrugged. In theory, how hard can it be? Famous last words, Lyra said, rolling her eyes. But it's worth a shot. As they approached the nearest ship, the hangar door slid open with a hiss, revealing a group of Quicks that looked none too pleased about the intrusion. Looks like we've got company, Jax said, his tone light despite the danger. Lyra grinned, drawing her weapon. Guess it's time for some uninvited hospitality. With that, they sprang into action, their movements a blur of calculated chaos. The Quicks were formidable, their reactions swift and precise. But Jax and Lyra fought with the kind of reckless abandon that only humans could muster. Back in the twisting corridors, Tala and Grieve were making their way toward the rendezvous point, the compound around them a cacophony of alarms and flickering lights. They moved with purpose, their resolve unshaken even as the walls seemed to close in on them. You think they even have a word for retreat in their language? Tala asked, glancing at Grieve as they navigated another turn. If they do, it's probably buried in a thesaurus somewhere, Grieve replied, his focus sharp. Figures, Tala said. Well, let's teach them a new one. Their path finally brought them to the hangar, where Jax and Lyra were holding their own against the Quicks. The scene was a chaotic ballet of lasers and bodies, each movement a testament to their determination. Looks like we missed the party, Grieve commented, his eyes wide with something between awe and horror. Not too late to join in, Tala replied, her gaze locking with Jax's across the hangar. With a nod, she and Grieve joined the fray, their combined efforts tipping the scales in the humans' favor. The Quicks were unrelenting, their coordination impressive. But the humans fought with a tenacity that was impossible to quantify, their desperation making them unpredictable and dangerous. As the battle raged on, it became clear that the humans had the upper hand. The Quicks were formidable, but their rigid adherence to order was their downfall. The humans were chaotic, unpredictable, everything the Quicks feared. The tide began to turn and the humans found themselves in control of the hangar. The remaining Quicks retreated, regrouping for their next move. But the humans knew it wouldn't be long before reinforcements arrived. Breathing heavily, Jack surveyed the damage, a satisfied grin on his face. "Well, that was fun. Speak for yourself," Lyra replied, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "I'm ready for a vacation. Let's not book the resort just yet," Tala said, her eyes scanning the ships. "We need to get out of here before they regroup." "Agreed," Greaves said, already moving toward the nearest ship. "Let's hope this joyride lives up to the hype." As they boarded the alien craft, the humans' resolve was stronger than ever. They had come too far to turn back now, their desperation fueling their escape. The ship hummed to life under Greaves' touch, its controls lighting up like a Christmas tree. "All right, folks," he said, grinning at the others. "Buckle up. It's gonna be a bumpy ride." With one final glance at the compound they'd just escaped, the humans blasted off into the unknown, their path uncertain but their determination unyielding. In the end, it was their unpredictability that had saved them, their willingness to take risks, to defy expectations. The Quicks had underestimated them, their fear of the unknown making them vulnerable. And as the humans disappeared into the vastness of space, they knew that their fight was far from over. But they also knew that they were ready for whatever came next. Because when it came to chaos, nobody did it better than humans. The ship hummed around them like a giant, metallic bee that had just been kicked in the abdomen. Tala, Jax, Lyra, and Greaves settled into the cramped cockpit, the reality of their situation sinking in like a stone in a swamp. They were out of the frying pan, sure, but the fire still loomed ahead, flickering ominously on the horizon of their collective psyche. "So, any idea where we're headed?" Jax asked, his voice laced with the kind of sarcasm that could cut through steel. He was fiddling with the laser pistol, probably just to remind himself that they weren't entirely helpless. "Yet, wherever's farthest from here," Greaves replied, his fingers dancing over the alien controls like a maestro with a death wish. "Or wherever we don't get blasted out of the sky by the Quicks. Whichever comes first." "Sounds solid," Lyra said, leaning back and closing her eyes as if she could nap away the impending doom. "I could use a vacation from this holiday." "Vacation, huh?" Tala muttered, staring out the viewport at the swirling stars. "Feels more like we're on the express train to hell." First-class tickets. Services include existential dread and probable death. As the ship jumped to a speed that made ludicrous seem like a conservative estimate, the silence that followed was permeated by the hum of machinery and the occasional creak of metal. It was the kind of quiet that made you want to scream just to break it, a silence that pressed in as much as the endless void outside. "Anyone else's optimism need a recharge?" Greaves asked, his voice dry as a desert bone. "If I had any optimism left, I'd use it to fuel this thing," Tala replied, forcing a laugh. "But I think we burned through that a while ago." Lyra opened one eye, peering at the console. "We're not exactly on the victory lap here, are we?" "Nope," Jax said, leaning back. "This is more like the try not to die lap." The cockpit was cramped and uncomfortable, and as the adrenaline from their escape began to fade, the reality of their situation settled in. They were out of the Quicks compound, sure, but now what? "Let's face it," Tala said, breaking the silence. "We're running on fumes, literally and figuratively." "We've been running on fumes since we signed up for this suicide mission," Jax added. "I thought we'd hit rock bottom when the coffee ran out." "Turns out there's always a deeper pit," Lyra said, a ghost of a smile playing at her lips. "It's like the universe's own surprise mechanic." "Just once," Greaves said, his fingers still working the controls. "I'd like a surprise that doesn't involve us getting killed." As if on cue, the ship's console beeped ominously, the sort of beep that generally preceded very bad news, like a death knell crossed with a fire alarm. "What's that?" Jax asked, eyeing the display with suspicion. "Your screwed alert. Close," Greaves said, his eyes scanning the data that had begun scrolling across the console. "Looks like the Quicks aren't done with us yet." A holographic map flickered into focus, displaying an array of bright, angry dots converging on their location. The Quicks' ships, no doubt eager to finish what they'd started. "And here I was, hoping for a quiet night," Lyra said, standing and stretching as if preparing for yet another round of chaos. "Hopes for suckers," Tala said, her expression hardening. "Let's get ready." As they scrambled to prepare for what was shaping up to be yet another life-or-death firefight, the ship jolted, a warning that their time was running short. "Grieve, how's your miracle work coming?" Tala asked, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Almost there," he replied, his focus razor-sharp. "Just need to tweak this and there." The ship lurched again, but this time it was purposeful, the engines roaring with renewed vigor. They had a chance, small, but a chance nonetheless. "Hold on to something," Grieve warned. "This is going to be a wild ride." The ship shot forward, propelled by some combination of ingenuity, desperation, and sheer human stubbornness. The Quicks might have had superior numbers, but they'd yet to master the art of flying by the seat of their pants, a skill Tala and her crew had honed to perfection. Outside, space turned into a blur of light and shadow, the stars streaking by like a bad acid trip. Inside, the ship rocked and shuddered, held together by hope and duct tape. "Think they'll follow us?" Lyra asked, bracing herself against a bulkhead. "Probably," Jax said, gripping his pistol. "But let's make it as unpleasant for them as possible." As the minutes stretched into eternity, the tension ratcheted higher, the silence punctuated by the whir of machinery and the occasional curse. "They are still behind us," Grieve reported, checking the rear display. "Persistent little bastards. And I thought we were annoying," Jax quipped, his eyes on the viewport. "Maybe they've got a grudge against our charming personalities," Tala said, her mind racing as she considered their options or lack thereof. They were running out of road, so to speak, and the Quicks were relentless. The ship's console beeped again, a cheery reminder that their situation was growing even more dire. "What now?" Lyra asked, her voice resigned. "Looks like they're trying some kind of psychological attack," Grieve said, his brow furrowing as he interpreted the data. "Great. As if we didn't have enough mental damage already. What's the plan, boss?" Jax asked, looking to Tala. Tala thought for a moment, her mind a whirl of strategies and possibilities. "We keep them on their toes. Change direction, mess with their heads. We need them confused, not confident." "Hell of a plan," Lyra said, a hint of a grin tugging at her lips. "Let's see how they like it." The ship veered sharply, the sudden change in direction sending everyone swaying precariously in their seats. Outside, the stars shifted, a dizzying dance that matched the chaos inside. "Hope you're not prone to motion sickness," Grieve joked, though his hands were steady on the controls. "I'm more worried about getting dead," Jax replied, his gaze darting between the console and the viewport. The Quicks weren't making it easy, their ships closing in, their tactics relentless and precise. But precision had its drawbacks. It left them vulnerable to the kind of unpredictable insanity that humans excelled at. As the battle continued, the Quicks' psychological attack began to take its toll. Images and sounds flooded their minds, haunting visions that played on their deepest fears and insecurities. Tala saw her team torn apart, the weight of every failure magnified 1,000-fold. Jax was visited by the shadows of those he'd lost, voices that accused and condemned. Lyra felt the crushing despair of a future without hope, an endless void that threatened to swallow her whole. But they were human, and humanity had a knack for turning even the darkest moments into defiant humor. "Is that the best they've got?" Tala said, shaking her head as she fought against the tide of dread. "Must have been a slow day at the scare factory." "Yeah, I'm really shaking in my boots," Jax added, forcing a grin as he wiped sweat from his brow. Do they think this is some kind of haunted house? Could use a few more jump scares, Lyra said, her voice steady despite the chaos. At least make it entertaining. Despite their bravado, the strain was beginning to show. Every moment was a test of their resilience, the Quix's attack designed to wear them down, to break their spirits. We can't keep this up forever, Grieve warned, glancing at the depleted energy reserves. We're running out of tricks. Then we make these last ones count, Tala replied, her resolve hardening. We've come too far to give up now. Their options were dwindling, the Quix tightening the noose. But Tala and her team refused to back down, their defiance a beacon in the darkness. We need to find somewhere to regroup, Jax said, his mind racing as he considered their options. Somewhere to catch our breath. Easier said than done, Lyra pointed out, her eyes scanning the console for any sign of a safe haven. But luck, it seemed, wasn't entirely absent. As the ship hurtled through the void, a faint signal emerged, a beacon of hope in the midst of despair. What's that? Tala asked, her attention drawn to the blinking light on the console. Distress signal, Grieve replied, his voice tinged with disbelief. Someone out there's in trouble, or it's a trap, Jax said, ever the skeptic. Either way, it's our best shot, Tala decided, setting her jaw. Let's see what's waiting for us. With a new destination in their sights, the ship altered course, the engines protesting but complying. The Quix were still in pursuit, but the humans were determined, their resolve unyielding. And as they raced toward the unknown, the team prepared for whatever lay ahead. Because if there was one thing they'd learned, it was that you didn't need to be fearless to keep fighting, just stubborn enough to refuse to quit. In the vastness of space, the Quix would learn that when it came to chaos, humans held the patent. The ship rattled like a rust bucket on its last legs as it barreled through space, everyone strapped in and pretending they weren't picturing their imminent deaths in grotesque detail. Tala watched the stars blur past, feeling like she was trapped in a kaleidoscope that might just eat her alive. Behind her, Jax fiddled with his laser pistol, swearing under his breath as it sparked unexpectedly. Considering their rotten luck, an accidental self-inflicted injury seemed about right. How are those tricks coming, Grieve? Tala asked, her voice barely loud enough to pierce through the ship's groans and creaks. Grieve was hunched over the controls, looking like a man trying to win a staring contest with a particularly stubborn computer. Tricks are for kids. I'm working on miracles, he muttered, his fingers dancing across the buttons. And this one's taking its sweet time. Maybe threaten to throw it out the airlock, Jax suggested, squinting at his malfunctioning weapon. Worked on my X. Your X or your pistol? Lyra asked, cracking an eye open from her attempt at a nap. Not that any sane person could sleep with the ship doing its best impression of a popcorn kernel in a microwave. Both, Jax replied, a shit-eating grin plastered on his face, though the pistol doesn't argue back. Just then, the ship's console beeped again, the kind of sound that had become the unfortunate soundtrack of their lives. This time, though, it was followed by a burst of alien symbols on the screen, the kind that made Tala's head hurt just looking at them. Quick's trying a new strategy, or did we hit the intergalactic lottery? Jax asked, leaning over Grieve's shoulder. Grieve's eyes narrowed at the symbols, his mind working overtime to make sense of them. I think they're trying to talk, or they're giving us a friendly middle finger. Hard to tell with these guys. Talking. That's rich, Lyra said, sitting up and stretching. Last I checked, their idea of conversation was more bang, bang, you're dead. Maybe they finally realized blowing us up isn't going to improve their Yelp reviews, Tala mused, rubbing her temples. Or they're inviting us to a massacre with hors d'oeuvres. Guess we're about to find out, Jax said as the symbols shifted into something vaguely resembling words. Roughly translated, they read, "Cease hostilities, let us communicate." Well, I'll be damned, Grieve said, scratching his chin. Looks like they want to chat. Maybe they finally got bored of killing us. Or it's a trap, Jax repeated, because if there was one thing he loved more than his laser pistol, it was reminding everyone just how screwed they really were. Yeah, well, if it is, we're already neck-deep in it, Tala said. She sighed, the weight of the universe, or at least their corner of it, on her shoulders. Let's see what they have to say. Grieve tapped a few buttons and a hologram flickered to life above the console. It was a Quix, all elongated limbs and eerie eyes, looking like someone had stretched it on a rack just for kicks. Humans, it rasped, in a voice like gravel in a blender. Why do you seek conflict? The million-credit question, Tala thought. Maybe because you keep trying to blow us up, she suggested, matching the Quix's stare with equal intensity. The Quix didn't flinch. Misunderstandings fostered by fear. We assumed your presence was an act of aggression. Well, you know what they say about assuming, Jax muttered, earning a snort from Lyra. Tala frowned, trying to see past the aliens' bizarre features to the intent behind them. We're here because we got caught up in something way above our pay grade. We're just trying to survive. The Quix tilted its head, considering her words. Survival is a value we share. Yet our actions have escalated conflict. We propose a ceasefire to rectify this. Rectify? Big word for someone who's been trying to splatter us across the cosmos, Jax said, crossing his arms. Why the change of heart? Isn't it obvious? Lyra interjected, looking at the Quix as if daring it to lie. They realized we're too stubborn to die quietly. You possess resilience, the Quix admitted, its voice carrying a grudging respect. Your determination is commendable. Well, we do love a good compliment, Tala said, her mind racing. Could this be the breakthrough they desperately needed? What do you propose? A dialogue, the Quix replied, to understand and resolve. Seems like we're all about resolutions today, Grieve said, his sarcasm light but present. But we're all ears. The Quix paused, its image flickering for a moment as if considering the implications. Meet us in neutral space. Coordinates are being transmitted. Neutral space, Jax echoed. Is that code for where we'll shoot you with less witnesses? Tala raised a hand to quiet him. We'll be there, but just know if this is a setup, we'll make sure you remember it. The Quix's eyes gleamed. We do not fear, we seek truth. The hologram disappeared, leaving the crew to stare at the blank space where it had been. Silence stretched, broken only by the ship's continued protests. Well, that was unexpected, Lyra said, echoing what everyone was thinking. Unexpected, that's putting it mildly, Jax replied, shaking his head. I mean, are we buying it? Buying it or not, it's our best shot, Tala said, exhaustion creeping into her voice like an unwelcome guest. And maybe, just maybe, there's more to them than we've seen. Great, Grieve said. I've always wanted to be part of an interstellar therapy session. Tala chuckled, despite herself. Brace yourselves, this might just work. Or it'll crash and burn spectacularly, Jax said, unable to resist the jab. Either way, Lyra said, leaning back and closing her eyes again, it'll be one hell of a show. With the coordinates locked in, the ship adjusted course, the engines groaning but obeying. The crew prepared for what lay ahead, their banter a shield against the uncertainty of the cosmos. You think this'll be the start of a beautiful friendship? Jax asked, sarcasm lacing his words. Or the beginning of another chapter in a very long, very bloody book, Grieve added. We'll find out soon enough, Tala said, her eyes fixed on the stars. But if there's one thing we know how to do, it's wing it. The ship soared onward into the unknown, carrying its crew towards a meeting that could change everything or nothing. But in the end, they were just humans, stubborn and reckless, with a knack for defying the odds. That and cracking jokes when they should be panicking. The ship hurtled through the void like a drunken pigeon, engines sputtering their discontent with each thrust. The crew sat in uneasy silence, the kind that made you itch for something, anything to break it. Tala, as ever, stared into the abyss, perhaps hoping it might blink first. They'd finally managed to arrange a meeting with the Quix, their erstwhile enemies turned frenemies. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of irony so sharp it could cut glass. Tala could almost hear it chuckling as she adjusted their trajectory towards the neutral space coordinates. Remind me why we're doing this again? Jax asked, the laser pistol still his chosen project. He was tinkering away, trying to coax life into it like a reluctant teenager dragging itself out of bed before noon. Because getting shot at was starting to lose its charm, Tala replied, not taking her eyes off the controls. And I don't know about you, but I'd like to not die for once. Death's overrated anyway, Lyra mumbled from her makeshift nest in the corner, a pile of discarded jackets and emergency blankets. But meeting with the guys who wanted us dead yesterday. Sounds like a great idea. Hey, they said ceasefire, Grieve pointed out, hands dancing over the control panel like a pianist on a particularly tricky sonata. And besides, we're out of options that don't involve ending up as cosmic debris. Ah yes, the good old we're screwed anyway strategy, Jack said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Always a crowd pleaser. The ship began to slow as they neared the designated meeting point, a stretch of space where no one had the upper hand and hopefully no one had a trigger finger that itched like a rash. They waited, tension coiling around the cockpit like a constrictor. Think they'll show up? Lyra asked, voice muffled by a blanket she'd pulled over her head. They better, Tala said, flicking a switch. We didn't come all this way just to twiddle our thumbs. Speak for yourself, Jack said, inspecting his gun. My thumbs are very talented. As if on cue, a quick ship materialized in front of them, elegant and alien, with curves that suggested it had been designed by someone who'd watched too much abstract art. Looks like they got the memo, Grieve commented. Or they're here to finish the job in person. Optimist, Lyra quipped, sitting up and shoving her makeshift bedding aside. Let's see what they have to say. The comms crackled to life, the Quicks leader's voice coming through clearer this time, perhaps with a hint less gravel. Humans, we are here. Yeah, we noticed, Tala replied, trying to match the alien's seriousness, but ending up somewhere just shy of sarcastic. Ready to talk, ready to listen, the Quicks corrected, their hologram flickering into view. The alien's elongated form seemed less menacing now, or maybe Tala was just getting used to the bizarre. Listening's a good start, Jack said, leaning back and putting his feet up on the console like he owned the place. Makes a change from the usual shoot first, ask questions, never approach. Why the change of heart? Tala asked, steering the conversation back on track. Last time we talked it was through gunfire. The universe is vast and filled with complexity, the Quicks replied, its eyes like twin planets, inscrutable and distant. Our leaders have reconsidered the wisdom of conflict. Wisdom, Lyra repeated, eyebrows raised. Are we talking about the same leaders? The Quicks' gaze didn't waver. There is wisdom in survival. Your actions demonstrated you are not to be underestimated. Or maybe we're just lucky bastards, Jax offered, grinning like the cat that got the cream, and possibly the whole dairy. Luck is subjective, the Quicks said, almost as though it were trying to humor him. But your resilience is noted. Great, Tala said, drumming her fingers on the console, but what's in it for us? We're not exactly in this for the accolades. Peace, the Quicks said simply. With peace there is opportunity for growth, for both our peoples, growth. Grieve echoed, you mean like economically, politically? Because last I checked our growth involved a lot of dodging and diving. Perhaps all of those, the Quicks responded, its tone even. We propose an alliance, an alliance. Tala repeated, trying not to sound as incredulous as she felt. Your seriousness is what led us here, the Quicks replied. Let us redefine our relationship. Redefine, Lyra snorted, like a cosmic couples therapy session. Jax chuckled. I can see it now. How do Quicks make you feel? Angry mostly. Tala shot them a look, but there was no malice in it. Just the strange camaraderie that came from surviving the impossible. So, what would this alliance look like? Cooperation in areas of mutual benefit. Trade. Technology exchange, the Quicks replied smoothly. And perhaps a combined effort to face greater threats. Greater threats. Jax asked, leaning forward. You mean there's something out there scarier than you? The Quicks' gaze was unflinching. The universe is vast. That's one way to put it, Lyra said, shaking her head. So what, you're offering to play nice because the big bad wolf's coming? We offer collaboration, the Quicks corrected. Mutually assured survival sounds pragmatic, Tala admitted. But how do we know we can trust you? Trust is earned, the Quicks said, as is respect. You have earned a trial of both, so what's the catch? Grieve asked, ever the skeptic. No catch, the Quicks replied. Simply a proposal. We seek to understand, not to conquer. Well, you're off to a good start, Jax said, putting his gun away as a gesture of goodwill, or perhaps just acknowledging it wasn't much good at the moment anyway. What do you think, Tala? Tala hesitated, the weight of the decision pressing down on her like gravity itself. Here they were, at the precipice of something that could reshape everything they'd known. She looked at her crew, at the friends who'd become family in the crucible of chaos and uncertainty. And she thought, why not take a gamble on something other than survival? All right, she said, meeting the Quicks' gaze. We'll try it your way, but if you're not straight with us, this alliance ends faster than a cheap thrill. The Quicks inclined its head, a gesture that seemed almost human. Understood. We welcome this beginning. The comms cut out, leaving the crew to sit in the newfound quiet. It was a different kind of silence now, not the tense expectation of impending doom, but the hesitant, fragile quiet of new beginnings. So, Lyra said, breaking the stillness that went better than expected. Better's a relative term, Jax pointed out, stretching his arms behind his head. But hey, look at us making friends. Grieve laughed, a rare, genuine sound. Didn't see that coming. Life's full of surprises, Tala said, feeling for the first time in a long while like maybe, just maybe, things were looking up. Yeah, well, let's not get too comfortable, Jax cautioned, ever the realist. Universe likes to throw curveballs, true, Tala agreed, but there was a lightness in her voice that hadn't been there before. But I'd say we're pretty good at catching them. They settled into a more relaxed rhythm, the ship drifting through space with a sense of purpose. They'd given peace a chance, and while it might not be a sure bet, it was a chance they were willing to take. Think they'll hold up their end? Lyra asked, settling back into her nest with a yawn. Only one way to find out, Tala replied, adjusting their course back into the stars. But I've got a good feeling about this. Good feelings and space travel don't usually mix, Grieve said, but there was no malice in his words, just the same cautious optimism they all felt. Maybe we'll be the exception, Tala said, a small smile tugging at her lips. Or maybe we'll end up in another quagmire, Jax added, but his tone was more playful than pessimistic. Either way, it'll be one hell of a ride, Lyra said, closing her eyes again. And as the ship continued its journey, the crew found themselves moving not just through space, but perhaps towards a future that for once didn't seem so bleak. They were human, after all, stubborn, irreverent, and armed with a brand of optimism that bordered on the ridiculous. It was either that or go quietly into the dark, and they weren't the quiet type. Here's to accidental diplomacy, Jax said, raising an imaginary glass. To stubbornness, Grieve agreed. To humanity, Tala added, feeling the truth of the words settle around them like a warm blanket. And with that they carried on, their future unwritten but theirs to shape. The universe was a funny place. Not ha-ha funny, more like watching a clown car crash into a circus tent while the elephants tried to make their escape. It was the sort of cosmic joke that left you wondering if maybe you were the punchline all along. And now, here they were, 4 humans and a ship that was barely holding together, floating in the vastness of space, basking in the glow of an unexpected alliance with the Quicks. It was the sort of day that would make you doubt your sanity if you weren't already well past that point. So, what now? Jax asked, twirling his laser pistol idly. Do we exchange friendship bracelets with the Quicks, or maybe go for a group hug? Tala smirked, adjusting the ship's trajectory. I'd love to see you try to hug one of those stick figures. You'd probably end up breaking something. Probably yourself. Lyra rolled her eyes from her corner, her nest now looking suspiciously like it was swallowing her whole. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We made nice with the aliens who were shooting at us a month ago. That's like befriending a rabid dog because it stopped foaming for 5 minutes. Or it's just saving the drool for later, Grieve chimed in, his fingers still dancing over the control panel. Trust me, I don't think they've completely forgotten about that little misunderstanding where we blew up their ambassador's shuttle. Details, Jax said with a shrug. Water under the bridge, or space junk past the solar wind. Whatever works. Tala leaned back in her seat, running a hand through her hair. Well, at least now we're not waiting for the moment they decide to crack us open like a can of Spam. Optimism. I almost didn't recognize it, Lyra said, poking her head out of her cocoon. But let's not pop the champagne just yet. How do we know they won't change their minds tomorrow? We don't, Tala admitted. But hey, that's what makes life interesting, right? Besides, the Quicks aren't exactly known for their spontaneity. If they're doing this, they probably mean it. Until they're not, Grieve muttered. Remember, guys, they still have their tiny sun pointed right at us. Details, Jax repeated, less convincingly this time. The ship drifted towards the artificial hellhole, a place they'd affectionately dubbed as such because calling it anything nicer would have been a disservice to honesty. It was their next stop, their chance to dismantle the bizarre zoo that had served as a death trap not so long ago. Apparent displays of peace came with responsibilities, after all. You think we'll be able to get through this without setting off any alarms? Tala asked, her gaze fixed on the screen displaying the hellhole's approach. Probably not, Grieve said, sounding like he was quite looking forward to the challenge. But I've got a few tricks up my sleeve, and by sleeve, I mean this hastily cobbled-together device. Let's hope it doesn't explode. High stakes, Lyra said dryly. I love it. Hey, at least the drone's got a caffeine addiction, Jax said, jerking a thumb towards the direction it had flown off in. One less thing for us to worry about, until it comes back with a vengeance, Tala said, feeling the irony wrap around her like an old sweater. Okay, Grieve, do your thing. Grieve nodded, flipping a switch on his device. It hummed to life with a sound reminiscent of a cat being dragged backward through a hedge. Hold tight, this might tingle a bit. The ship shuddered as the walls of the compound loomed closer, their shifting forms a reminder that this place had been designed by someone who thought mazes were too straightforward. Tala gritted her teeth, feeling the familiar dance of adrenaline in her veins. Grieve, you got this, she asked, her voice steady in the chaos. Piece of cake, he replied, his fingers moving like lightning over the controls. Just don't expect it to be a cake you'll want to eat. The ship settled into a hover above the compound, engines whirring like a box of angry bees. They were here to dismantle the zoo, to strip away the charade of the artificial ecosystem that had almost cost them their lives. The Quicks had agreed to it as a gesture of goodwill, and Tala was eager to see if this alliance was more than just pretty words. Let's get this over with, Jax said, unbuckling his seatbelt with a flourish. I've got a date with not dying. The crew descended into the compound, the familiar kaleidoscope of corridors stretching ahead of them. It was still a disorienting mess, but at least this time they knew they weren't walking into a trap. Probably. Feels like home, Lyra said, her voice laced with sarcasm. If your home's a shifting labyrinth designed by a sadistic architect. I dunno, Jax replied. I once lived in a place with worse wallpaper. Can we focus here? Tala interjected, leading the way through the maze with the confidence of someone who'd been lost too many times before to care anymore. Grieve trailed behind, lugging his device like an oversized lunchbox filled with doom. Let's just hope the Quicks aren't having second thoughts, he said, eyeing the walls like they might sprout teeth. They made their way to the control center, the room still illuminated by the harsh, sterile light that made everyone look like they'd been dead for a week. The consoles hummed with energy, awaiting the commands that would peel back the layers of the artificial hellhole. Here goes nothing, Grieve said, plugging his device into the nearest panel. It beeped in protest, but the lights on the console flickered to life. Nice setup, Jax said, peering over Grieve's shoulder. Did you leave the instructions in Klingon or what, please? Klingon would be too easy, Grieve shot back, his fingers tapping out a rhythm that only he seemed to understand. The compound shivered, the walls beginning to shift in earnest, but this time it was controlled, deliberate. Tala watched as the fake flora and fauna began to retract, the zoo dismantling itself piece by piece. Looks like it's working, Lyra said, her voice tinged with relief. I'd almost forgotten what success felt like. Don't jinx it, Tala warned, but there was a hint of a smile on her lips. It was a strange feeling, watching something come apart and knowing it was a step towards putting things back together. The zoo's dismantling was as smooth as could be expected, which was to say it was still a chaotic mess, but at least it wasn't trying to kill them. The corridors shifted back into place, creating a pathway back to their ship. "Any last words for the place?" Jax asked, glancing back at the compound. "Yeah," Tala said, her voice firm. "Good riddance." They boarded the ship, and Tala keyed in the coordinates for their next destination. It was time to return to neutral space